I'm so excited for all of you to be in attendance of this incredible panel. I'd like to open this up to all of you on the panel, since some of you in the audience may have not actually been able to screen their films and projects yet. But if each of you could just briefly describe your project, I know that everyone in here would love to hear about them. Starting with you, Denise.
So Taga is a horror short film that is written and directed by Jill Sachs, and it's premiering tonight at the Midnight Shorts program. And it follows the story of Vivi, who is a third culture Filipina American who visits the Kalinga mountain regions of the Philippines to reconnect with her roots, but ends up with the wrong crowd of conservationist Westerners. Let's just say they end up disrespecting the culture. So it's a lot about identity and what it takes to reconcile with your heritage.
I'm also Filipino, so yes, I know.
Woo, shout out.
Let's go. Farhad?
Yeah, my film is called Take Me Home. It's premiering tomorrow at 3 at the library. It's a film about family, basically. Tracks the story of a 38-year-old Korean American adoptee to Midwestern parents, and the protagonist has a cognitive disability, and she's in this sort of caregiving and care receiving relationship with her aging parents, and we follow their journey. Yeah, go watch it if you can. It's playing through the week.
La Tierra del Valor is a short documentary about pop star Neza Hernandez, who was invited to sing the national anthem at the Dodger Stadium. And due to the crazy ICE raids and deportation, she decided to sing it in Spanish as a way to honor her heritage. And it's a story about getting into your culture and respecting where you're coming from.
Hot Water is a film directed by Ramsey Bashor, who's a first-time director. It's about a mom and a son on a road trip across the country. It's funnier than it sounds. And the other film I'm here with, In the Blink of an Eye, is directed by Andrew Stanton, who made WALL-E and Finding Nemo. This is not animated, but it is 3 interlocking stories, one in 45,000 BC with Neanderthals, one in the present, and one 300 years in the future on a spaceship. And I just, in case anyone's seeing it, it's like an art movie and science fiction close.
Hi, I'm here with Joybubbles, which premieres tomorrow night at 6 p.m. over at the Yarrow. Joybubbles is a story about human connection, about one man's life. When he was a boy, he had perfect pitch and he was able to whistle a magic tone into the telephone that was able to hack into the Bell telephone system. And through that, he inspired probably the first generation of hackers, including Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, who built their own hacking device based on his whistling. And that created the Apple computer that then created the iPhone. So he's kind of inadvertently connected to the creation of the iPhone. But as he got older, he started age regressing due to trauma, childhood trauma, and redefined himself as Joybubbles, in which he started creating phone lines where people could reach out for connection and listen to stories and talk to him. And he became, very much a Mr. Rogers type of character in his later life.
The Only Living Pickpocket in New York, it's a movie about a pickpocket played by John Turturro, who robs the wrong people, and he finds himself in the streets of New York just trying to find what he stole back. So it's a bit of a love poem to a forever changing New York. It's a lot of new and old, and it's a beautiful portrayal of New York I'm very excited about.
I love that. Wow, we've got an eccentric, eclectic panel here. Every one of you has such a different type of project, which I absolutely love. So it's kind of everybody can pick their poison and choose what they want to see. But it sounds like we have a lot of different varieties to choose from here on this panel today. So I want to keep the line open still, open to everyone for this next question. What key aspects of identity or community do you want to communicate, and how did you craft craft helping bring those to life on screen?
For Taga, I think the most important aspect of our identity is being part of the diaspora. Filipinos are everywhere around the world, not just in the US. And it is such a shared experience that we have. And that was one of the most important things that I talked about with my director. Just kind of having that push and pull of being Filipino and living somewhere else. And I really, having those conversations with Jill really inspired in how I created the musical landscape of a horror film. Basically just me having the same questions that the film asked contributed a lot into the music, and I can talk more about that in further questions.
I love that. As a Filipino as well, so my grandmother came over after she married my grandfather in an Air Force base. And what's funny is you'll go to any place, like a grocery store, and anyone that's Filipino, they'll start talking to a random stranger. And it's as if they're your family. It's hilarious. And I'd always ask my grandma, are we related to that person that just rang us up at the register? And she's like, no. I just met her.
But you might be.
I actually, yes, this is the other thing. Filipinos are related to all Filipinos.
Where
somehow.
everyone's a cousin, a tito, a tita.
100%. Does anyone else want to go next?
To me, for Naza, it was very important to show the family dynamic. This is something that I related to personally. Her father came from Colombia with nothing. He built a life for her and her sister. He was able to provide a life for her to pursue her talent, her dance and singing. I moved here 10 years ago, and I built a life from scratch, and I have two daughters. I really connected with that, and I just wanted to bring it up to the screen so that the audience can relate to her family and their sacrifice that they did. And this became the core emotional anchor for the film, because seeing her family dynamics and then seeing the ICE raids and what they're doing to Latino women and men, you kind of picture other Neza's family being attacked by ICE raids. So I thought this was very important for the film.
And have your daughters actually seen some of your films? They're like, Dad, I want to grow up to be like you one day.
Yeah, they sometimes sit on my lap, but some of the footage is a little bit violent.
A little bit, have to edit that out.
And some curse words, so.
Gotta censor it, I love that. Go ahead.
Thanks. I was sitting here thinking about this question and listening to everybody's answers, and I can't help but compare the two movies I'm here with and sort of think about how that works. But Hot Water is, Ramsey grew up in Beirut, spent summers in Indiana, and the film is about a mom who grew up in Beirut and moved to Indiana, and her son who was born here. And a big part of the edit was sort of finding and communicating the longing that Leal, the mother character, has for home. And I think was really about drilling into the specifics of being that person with a family in Beirut, with a mother and a sister who she misses. And it really was about the sort of weird, specific, quirky things that happen to you on a road trip. And in the blink of an eye, we were kind of doing the opposite thing, where what made the stories weave together the best is when we found the universal themes. And the process of editing that movie was about unweaving it and reweaving it and unweaving it. I mean, there was a million different ways to cut it. I think I tried all of them. But it wasn't so much about the specifics. It was about the universals. And I think, I don't know, it's just two interesting ways that film approaches, like, bringing us together in a community.
That's crazy. Beirut to Indiana. What a big difference in change
Just a little
of
bit
scenery,
of
just a
culture
tad bit.
clash. Yeah.
So I still want to keep this open as well for the next question, but this panel is about turning personal stories into shared ones. What creative choices helped audiences see themselves or their communities reflected in your film?
Yeah, I think at the foundation of Take Me Home is that we're all multifaceted. We can't be defined by one thing. So Anna is, it's an empowerment story. It's like she refuses to be put into a box. It's her world. She's the hero of her own story, and I think so are the parents. They're caregivers and receivers of care. They find themselves outside of, at odds with the healthcare system, but they also are sort of figuring it out. And as the film is based on the director Liz Sargent's life to a certain extent, and she's one of 11 siblings, some of them adoptees. And, there is a certain choice in that, this is your chosen family, and how they navigate that is at the heart of the film. And as far as the cinematography, I think, the idea was always to leave space in the film for the audience to find some sort of resonance with it. We're all sons or daughters or husbands, or, we've all sort of engaged with the process of care in our own way. And, there's some people from the team here, but everybody attaches to the movie at different places. It could be a moment of reaction when, let's say, Anna has just said something to her dad and her dad is trying to process. I think we can see it reflected, in our own lives. And for me, the audience really does sort of interact with the story in a very different way than any other movie that I've made. And the hope was to sort of preserve that idea.
Oh, that's so crazy. Anna has 11 siblings. I'm an only child, so I don't know what that's like, but that's a cool dynamic. Go ahead, Patrick.
Yes, so Joybubbles was born blind, and part of his desire to make human connection was through the phone. And so we decided very early on that we needed to make this film accessible to the blind community. And so I have a statement here that I cannot memorize, so I'm going to have to read it to you in full. But Joybubbles is the first film ever to screen at Sundance with open audio description in theater. With AD, human narrator describes the key visuals, timed on-screen action. AD is the accepted format for making films accessible to blind and low-vision audiences globally. Audiences at Sundance can request an audio description headset as well as a device for captions or amplified audio at any Joybubble screening, and are encouraged to attend one of the open access screenings, which is next weekend, January 29th and January 30th, to hear the AD track played along with the film. So this is really interesting because the film, the way I cut it, is kind of a radio edit where we were able to tell his story through his own voice because he's not here to tell it himself. And by doing that, we had to fill visuals of stock footage and tell his story through animation. But through the AD will describe to the audiences who choose what is happening on screen in between Joybubbles' own dialogue.
Wow, I've never even really seen audiences having access to something
I'd
like
like to
that.
jump in for a second.
Yes,
so
please do,
Take Me
Farhad.
Home as well. You can see an accessibility screening, which is open captions, audio description, and it's sensory friendly. So there will be sort of accessibility needs that have been accounted for. And I think there's information on the website. I'm not sure if it's on the 28th or the 29th, but it's in Salt Lake City. And it's important, like you said, Patrick, like who is the audience? I think there's also, like, for me, and perhaps I'm speaking on behalf of a few others here, it's like film is an egalitarian medium. I grew up in India. You don't need to be able to read to watch a movie. It's a kind of extension of this oral storytelling tradition. And I think, like, bringing more people into the tent is definitely the way forward. And I think there's this aesthetics of inclusivity that is now part of the conversation. I'm so happy to see that at Sundance there's a way to do it.
Absolutely, thank you.
I love that. Yes, let's clap for that. It's incredible. All right, so now I want to start off with Denise with Taga. So Taga explores identity and cultural roots, as you kind of discussed a little bit earlier. As a composer, how did you score Vivi's inner journey while rooting the music in the community's collective identity?
So when I was living in the Philippines, I started recording some samples of, recording musicians playing indigenous instruments. And I just so happened to have a collection of recordings of gongs and bamboo instruments that I recorded in the same region that this film was shot in, the Kalinga Mountains. So I thought this was the perfect opportunity to unearth said samples and help the representation of the community through these sounds. So you'll hear it in certain rhythmic patterns that are also very much like native to that part of the Philippines. And interestingly, when I received the cut, actually, there was some diegetic percussion playing in the background, like just the village being themselves. And it was caught on the sound recording of the film, and we kept it. and I actually just added a few things to enhance it. And that's rhythm, percussion is such a strong part of our identity, pre-colonial identity of Filipinos. So I really used that to help ground or localize us to where Vivi was. And then to help kind of make it more feel like communal, I used some vocals, which I think is like, vocals are the most universal instrument out there. We all have it, we've all used it, and it just has such a strong power in delivering, with doing so little too, but with delivering history and community. So I hope that by infusing the vocals, it helped to make the musical landscape of this film more accessible to a non-Filipino audience.
What was the specific region of the Philippines that this was from?
Kalinga.
Kalinga.
Yeah.
Okay, and there's like over 1,000 dialects as well in the Philippines.
We have 7,000 islands.
I was going to say, yeah, 7,000 islands. Lots of different languages out there, so a lot of cultural diversity. But I love that it sounds like it was just so organic in the composition. So I love to hear that. So next up, Farhad, I'd like to talk about Take Me Home and how it follows Anna's journey through family and failing systems. How did your cinematography choices show her perspective, her resilience, and relationships while also immersing viewers in her world?
I think Take Me Home is sort of an unapologetic film. It makes no excuses for who its characters are, what the world is that they live in. The foundation of it was Anna. You know, we didn't want to impose we didn't want her to fit into the traditional way that we make movies. We wanted her to lead the process. And of course, it's something that's very easy to say, but when it comes down to brass tacks, it means that everyone in the crew has to know the story really well so that, you know, as we are agile and we pivot, the improvisations are sort of true to the heart of the film and not just reactive sort of, you know, things that we do in the moment. It filters through all elements. Like, for example, we shot 1:6:6, which is a slightly squarer aspect ratio than traditional cinematic format. And the idea was to be able to live on her face, but also see the world that she inhabits. You know, we always talked about how we wanted the world to feel like, you know, you were walking into your parents' house or you were walking into your friend's house. And I think there's this also idea of accessibility of aesthetics. You know, sometimes movies can feel like a different world, and sometimes we want to be transported to, you know, other worlds. But I think there's also this idea that this movie is for everyone, and you should feel comfortable, and you should feel the ability to attach yourself to the predicament that these people find themselves in, and that's a way to build empathy, you know? And then once you start talking about these things, you realize that it comes down to everything, you know? We lit the set more or less with very broad strokes, so we gave the actors flexibility to move around. There was a very clear visual language, but it was built with some elasticity to it. So, you know, the idea was that we could find pieces of the story, transpose them to different rooms and different locations, and not feel like we were chasing something or asking Anna to synthesize or to manufacture a performance. And, you know, it's also a process for Liz. It's her first feature. She's done a ton of other work, but it's a very personal story. And as much as it is about Anna, it's also about being in service to the director. You know, this is like, as craftspeople, like, this is our devotion. You know, this is our offering to the world. And it's about how do you, you know, let that artist blossom. You know, what is the process that is going to let their best ideas kind of come to the surface? And, you know, I think we've all been on movies where it feels like, it's sort of like this big cruise ship that can't make any moves, you know, and for us, we wanted to be like a little tiny, speedy sailboat, you know, and we could pivot. You know, if the sun came out, we would jump outside and shoot something. If there was a thunderstorm, we would be like, can we use it? Does it work for the story? You know, like, for example, we got shut down. We shot for just over 4 weeks, and I think we got shut down for lightning every day the first week, every single day.
That's crazy.
And then, you know, it's like, what do? You lean into it.
Yeah.
You know, the lightning becomes a metaphor for the outside world and the danger that lurks outside the safe space that the parents have created in the house. On a practical level, it means that your generators can't work and your crew can't go outside. So, you know, the gaffer and the electric and grip team, they relit the entire house to work off of the house power. And, you know, for those of you that work in the movie business, that means no big lights, you know, no generators, and just really being as nimble as possible, while still, the movie looks incredible. I hope you guys will see it. But the beauty is born from the experiences of the family and how we're photographing them. It's not sort of like a cinematic beauty that's imposed onto the film.
I love that. So not only are we going to feel like we're going home, but you were working with Mother Nature. My goodness. I've had concerts canceled with thunder and lightning, so I can't imagine shooting a film.
It's not fun. I don't recommend it.
Okay.
Much as I loved working in Orlando, I think maybe we'll choose the non-lightning season.
Non-lightning season, of course. Mohamed, for La Tierra del Valor, I'd love to know how it shows community when you're facing fear with courage. How did your editing highlight both Neza's personal story and the shared immigrant experience?
I always love to approach stories from a personal perspective, especially if it's a political story, because it's much more authentic. I don't like to set certain agenda myself. I love the artist or the character to speak for themselves. In this case, the world is the US and what's happening in it, and the character is Neza, facing this very critical situation with what's happening with the Latino community. And she's now faced that she needs to do something to really express herself and express her culture with something that is very, very simple and yet very powerful. And she did the only thing that she can do is just to sing in Spanish. I was always trying to create a balance between how much information I'm providing to set the world and how this information or what's happening around her in the world is affecting her emotionally and affecting her choices. And this also led to creating a balance between scenes that has a lot of tension and scenes that has breath. And when they both kind of work hand in hand, it's like a song, like you have a scene that has like high tension and very high stakes, and then you have another scene afterwards where it's very quiet, where Neza is reflecting or thinking of like, how is she going to make this decision? So I think like balancing between both, you're able to paint a picture of both what's happening around Neza and inside her.
I love that, through song. That's so lovely. And I'm assuming it's a beautiful, stunning voice that she has as well.
She's amazing. She's very talented, and also she is an influencer. And at the time, I was very impressed by the Instagram Reels that has a lot of split screens in a vertical format. And I was trying to pitch to the director to tell the whole film in vertical. It didn't work. But the intro, we were inspired by like split screens and layering archival on top of each other because we're trying to blend between both mediums and try to appeal to younger and wider audience and try to be contemporary. And I feel we did a good job like bringing that medium with how they're editing the reels and the split screens and layering the footage into the film. And I feel it helped the film to become stylistically contemporary.
I love that. What a nice little sideline story, though. Found her on Instagram. How cool. Yeah. Mollie, I'd like to direct this question to you next. In the blink of an eye connects 3 different storylines across thousands of years through love, loss, and connection. How did editing create continuity and shared human feelings across those different timelines?
I'm very excited to answer this question, but I also want to say how fun it is to hear you. I love editors. I have more opportunities to hear editors talk. So hearing about cinematography and music and just the specificity that you guys bring, it's really beautiful and it's really inspiring.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Aww, thank you.
Yeah.
I feel seen.
So what we learned on In the Blink of an Eye was that the most powerful thing we could do, and this is going to sound so obvious, this is how editing is. You take months to figure out something that is completely clear in retrospect. But the thing that gave us the most emotional punch was when all 3 storylines were experiencing the same thing at the same time, whether it was birth or death or fear, whatever it was. So much of the discovery process of the film was figuring out how to get the same emotion in each story. And again, I hear myself saying it, I'm like, duh. But it really did take a long time to figure out what was working from the script and what we needed to pull out and revise and rearrange and that showing, you know, that a Neanderthal woman mourns in the same way that a human woman does, in the same way that you would mourn if you were alone on a spaceship. It just really like tripled the emotional impact. And so that was a lot of the edit process on the film.
Can you give us some examples of how long it took? I know you don't want to go back to that.
Yes,
but
we were editing Blink for a year. And I give Searchlight Pictures a lot of credit because we kept sending cuts to them and they kept saying it's not there yet. And at the time, that was incredibly frustrating. But looking back on it, it was exactly the challenge that we needed, you know? And they were pretty good about not being prescriptive and just being like, we think you can get this farther. And so I would just go back and I would look at the dailies I had and I would figure out how I could rearrange them to say something else or to give a different feeling or to find a connection that I just hadn't been awake to before. And it was just a process of searching and searching and searching. And to have that kind of deeply annoying support from the studio was actually very helpful.
How close was the script to the final film?
In spirit, they're the same. In reality, I think there's very few places where the weave matches the way it was scripted. And actually, there are a few times where we would try everything and then come back around to what Colby did in the script. And it was like, okay, if Colby thought this, and I think this, and Andrew thinks this, probably this one's the right call. But when you have infinity options, you go through a lot of choices.
So was there certain like cutting points that always worked to go from one storyline to the other?
There were a couple cut points that were always there. And there were a couple things that were really designed in production. And then I would say, you know, 85% of them are ones that we found in post. Because there were a few major story shifts. There were a few things that in the script were really out of sync. You know, these two people were doing this. And this story, you know, it's like there was a birth in this one, a birth in this one, but these guys didn't have a birth until over here. So, okay, if we pull this one here, what's the ripple effect of that? How do we have to rearrange it to make everything else come into sync? So it was just endless
crazy.
revisions.
I was like a whiteboard. I wonder what the whiteboard looked like. That must have been crazy.
I have never worked scene cards harder than I did on this movie. They have so many holes in them from all the different times they got pinned to the board.
Well, thank you,
To just
Mollie.
jump in for 1 second to Mollie, you know, I think this thing of, you know, we don't often have time on set. Like it's always the most valuable commodity, right? And I think on this movie, I think we took a page out of this book of like listening to what the film needs and not trying to superimpose your own framework. And it's so beautiful to hear you say that because in some ways it's about sort of like being deeply connected, but also taking a step back and let the work kind of what it needs, it'll tell you eventually, right?
Yeah, you have to get real quiet to let it talk to you, but it will.
Yeah.
It will.
You have to listen though.
Yes. Patrick, Joybubbles. I just love saying Joybubbles for some reason. Joybubbles covers 6 decades of Joybubbles shaping his identity and influencing communities. How did you use archival footage, audio, and news to edit his story and show his entire evolution?
Yeah, first of all, I'm mostly a narrative editor, so I'm dipping my toes in the doc world. I was here in 2020 with a short doc called The Star Sisters that shares similar themes of older people age regressing due to trauma. But we also had animation in that film as well that kind of carried over to Joybubbles. And so the hardest part for me was I'm used to having a script and visuals and audios to work with. And instead we had tapes and tapes and tapes of recordings that Joybubbles had done himself over the years, because he would not only he was well known, you know, in some communities. He would give seminars. He would talk about his life. So we had those recordings, but he would also just go out to the mall and record the sounds that he was hearing and describe how the cold felt or the sounds of people walking around the mall and things like that. And so we had all those as well. So I had to, like I mentioned before, I had to craft kind of a radio edit out of all of those. But then when thinking about what to show visually, there's only so much recorded media of him. We're really lucky because when he was in college, he was showing off his whistling trick for some college students who then began to use him as sort of a parlor trick. And he got caught he whistled to Montreal, and the operator stayed on the line and caught him red-handed, and he was kicked out of college. So that was kind of the first recorded media of him in newspapers, and he became known as the Whistler, and so there were news reports about him. So we had those to work with. And then as the hacking revolution got going in the early 70s, news reports reached out to him and interviewed him, so we had those as well. But as he got older, it was less and less and less media for us to work with. So we decided that visually we made a rule that we would not reenact anything, that only he could tell his own story. So we used abstract visuals, stock footage. My co-editor, Bradford Thomason, really honed all of that in his edit. We wanted to make sure that the way he described things, that we could find complementary visuals that would also describe the things that he was saying. And because he could be so imaginative as well. So we used animation to kind of fill in some of those gaps. But yeah, it was challenging by having such very limited media on the subject and how we could use it, especially in the assembly cut. It would be a lot of black on the screen, but then just a little spurts of stuff that we had for him. And then over time, our director, Rachel Morrison, is a fantastic archivist, and she was able to really find some amazing stock footage to help kind of illustrate what Joybubbles is talking about.
I love that. Sounds like quite the balancing act, but it sounds like you managed it quite well. I'm sure that everybody's happy you dipped your toes in there and got a little wet for this project. Rocío, I know you're all the way down there. I'm going to screech on over so you can see me. The only living pickpocket in New York blends nostalgic and modern New York, which I love so much. How did production design show the city's changing identity while reflecting the main character's world and communities?
Well, The Only Living Pickpocket in New York is a movie about the underdogs and anti-heroes of this city, in a way. Like you have a pickpocket, played by John Turturro. We have a pawn shop owner, Steve Buscemi. We have also like a hacker in a hacker in a vape shop. And also some shady business owner in a Chinese herb shop.
Always a shady person, huh?
So it's like all these, like, in a way, like these underdogs of this city. So it was so interesting to get to tell these stories. And we went with such, we went like really crazy with our research to try to tell these stories correct. Just to give you an example, we hired a pickpocket consultant.
Oh my gosh, there's such thing as that? That's crazy.
And it was such a cool process. Like I remember I had to ask him questions, and one of my questions was, what would you keep? Like if you rob for 30 years, what objects would you keep in your house? So there was this idea of, value in the objects. But going back more to your question, when I design movies, I always try to isolate, the basic concepts that the concepts that we are constantly referencing. And one of the big concepts for us was contrasts. So New York is a city that is so full of contrasts. You have the old and the new coexisting together. You have opulence and grime, in the same block. You have the underground, with the tunnels, and then the skyscrapers. Our character Harry, John Turturro, he robs a businessman from the top, the super tall building, and robs him in the subway. So that's the contrast, going.
You have a lot to work with in New York, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Limitless.
I have a question for Rocío. How and where did you find a pickpocketing consultant?
And can he come here and teach us a few things?
Only thing I'm gonna say, because we cannot, he is a real pickpocket. We flew him from Atlanta, and I remember there was an ongoing joke that when he came to our office, it was everybody watch your pockets.
It's instead of taking a yoga class, you could take a pickpocket class now, huh? That's so
and he thought John, like to how to properly do the movements. So that was also another part of like, getting really, really authentic.
So you can
without-
pickpocket now. So we've got to watch our wallets.
Everybody watch out.
All right, I'd like to open this next question up to everyone on the panel, so feel free to answer first if you'd like. Looking back, was there a moment when the film's meaning grew bigger than you actually expected, revealing something deeper about humanity or connection?
So I read the script in India after a long day's shoot in the middle of the night in a hotel room. And I think I immediately called my wife and I was like, this is going to be an amazing, consequential movie. And even if I can't shoot it, I have to be part of manifesting it in some way. Throughout the film, like we were shooting on location in Orlando, and of course we had a tiny crew, but there was a larger group of people that was supporting it, whether it was sort of location owners or people sort of involved with the production. They kept coming up to us and telling us how they would watch a scene completely out of context, be captivated by Anna's performance, and they'd come up to us and tell us how much of their own life they saw in the movie. And it's one of the blessings of independent filmmaking is that you're sort of like getting your hands dirty, you're interacting with real people, you're out in the world, you're not in a studio lot. And so we got constant feedback over the sort of 12 or so weeks that we were in Orlando. People literally would come up to us off the street after having seen like a glimpse into the performance and tell us a story of how it sort of intersected with their own life of caregiving or receiving care or struggles with the healthcare system or ageism or something like that. Yeah, it was really, really inspiring.
I love that. And I always used to say, even if it affects just one person, it's kind of like a fire that's lit and it affects more people. So really cool to hear that you've had that experience with this film so far. Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, when I got into Joybubbles, I was intrigued because it was a boy that could whistle a magic tone into the phone, and I just love quirky stories. But where it sort of transcended for me was, deep in my edit, we decided to do a second round of interviews with some people in Minnesota where he lived, and in the '80s he created this phone line called the Zizorific phone line, and people discovered it by going to the back of the yellow pages and the very last, it was ZZZYERIFFIC. So it was the very last thing in the phone book. And so people would discover it that way. And so I wonder what that's about. And when you would call it, it would be audio recordings that he set on his answering machine. And he would update it every week. And so watching these interviews where these grown adults talked about, the mystery and the wonder of calling this, because I don't know, we're so far removed from this now, but like I remember like going into the phone book and like finding the numbers that you could call that would give you like world history trivia and things like that. And listening to these now grown adults talk about how much they loved to call into this phone line and it meant so much to them. And some of them actually reached out to him personally and because he was blind, they would take him places, take him out to eat. Some would go to the movies with him. One went to go see the movie Big with him. And that's where I really started to understand the depth of the human connection and how these people were so touched by him and his life.
Wow, I do miss that. Anybody still remember the white pages, yellow pages? Yes? Okay.
Can you call now? Is there a line?
Yeah.
We
Is there a
actually,
line?
right here, we've got a phone line, 350-FEELING, which is his number. It's been recreated for the movie. You can call that right now and it'll tell you about the movie.
Oh, I love that. That's so cool. Everybody jot that down.
I'd love to answer the question.
Yes,
Yeah.
go for it.
So on the surface, Taga is a horror film. There's like monsters, there's tribes and foreigners. But the moment that it clicked for me that this was something bigger than just like trying to scare its audience was towards the end where our character Vivi participates in the local practice of burning crops. And mind you, she's with the conservationist group, so that was like the antithetical to like their purpose there. But when I wrote the music for that, the direction that I got from my director was so different from my instinct. My instinct was to write something that reflected some kind of terror, grief. You've just seen a burning mountain, so it was like my instinct was this kind of darkness. But the direction that I got from Jill was peace and content, and that's when it clicked for me. Like this movie is, in all of the horror that it comes with, it's really about how Vivi found peace in participating in the local practices. And it really is about her, as much as their group wanted to help, it's being mindful of how you help the communities you choose to help. And sometimes it looks different from your idea of help. And I think the most important part is that we're listening to these communities and making sure that the help we give is something that is received by them and welcomed by the community.
It almost sounds like the music as well is a bit of a character.
Yeah,
in
yeah,
its
it
own.
did, yeah.
What would you name the character, I guess, if you had to?
Ooh, I'm gonna have to think about that a little
We'll
bit.
come back, don't worry. Yes, go ahead, Rosy.
Something that happened when I was designing this movie that I didn't think about when I first read the script. You know, this idea of the value of objects, that how much value we assign to material things. And it's something that came up when I was designing Harry's apartment, the Pickpocket. And, you know, the process, he's been robbing people since the 80s, means he at least had an apartment since that time, like in our storyline. And we had decided that he was a very successful pickpocket in the 90s, so he had money to thrive. So he bought this set of Eames chairs, right? And like now is, you know, the year 2025 when we shot it, and his wife is dying, and now you see the Eames chairs in the background with like medical supplies. So like something that was, you know, we assign value to something in the moment. It's like, oh my God, these chairs are the most amazing thing, and suddenly, you know, in the face of sickness and loving one is going through something like that. No, none of that.
Nothing compares to health. You don't have your health, what do you have, right?
Yeah, it's like none of that matters. So how this house changed with that sickness, like for example, like in your living room, maybe you would have like your couch center in the wall with a picture frame on top. Now you have to move all the furniture around to bring a hospital bed. So how does all that set change? So we designed the set before that happens. That happened, and for the movie, we had like floor plans for like all the transitions, even though we never saw those in the movie. We just had to go through the process of all these years. So that's
a lot to think
really
about.
fun. Yeah.
We just have a couple more minutes, so I just want to end with one last question open to all of you as well. What message do you hope your film leaves with the audience?
Love your roots, be proud of where you're coming from. Don't let anyone scare you, and express yourself.
Yeah, I think both Hot Water and In the Blink of an Eye, what they're trying to get across is that everybody has a story, and that you don't, you know, a mom and a son on a road trip. He has a coming of age, yes, but she also has a journey, and she makes choices that are different from her identity as a mother. She also has an identity as an immigrant, as a daughter, as a sister, and I think Blink too. We're just in this awful moment in the world, and the being here at Sundance and feeling the love for specific stories and unique perspectives is, I think, what ties. I know my films. I don't want to speak for you guys, but it feels like it ties these films together. It's like every story has value. Every story is interesting. Every person has value. And I think that's what both of my movies are trying to say.
Love that. Go ahead,
Yeah, I
Farhad.
think what I'd like people to take away from Take Me Home is that, you know, you are the hero of your story. And sometimes it doesn't feel like that. Sometimes it doesn't feel like you have the agency, but actually it's an active process of claiming that despite your circumstances, you know. And if I could add a second thing, it's that, you know, the story of the parents is like the choice to adopt is a choice made out of love, and a choice that maybe other people would judge them for, you know, considering, you know, all the things that come along with adopting. But if you have love to give it. You know, this is how we heal each other in the world, and we can lift each other up, you know, and help everyone be the best version of themselves. That's what we want to put into the world with the film.
Exactly. That's amazing. Go ahead, Denise.
Yeah, just kind of a repeat of what I said earlier. When we're trying to help other people in other communities, it's to be mindful of how we are helping them and making sure we're listening to how they want to be helped.
Yeah, if there's anything to take away from Joybubbles, I really hope that we definitely live in tough times, and want to be a reminder that there are good, pure-hearted people in the world that just enjoy bringing joy into each other's lives, and that they still exist.
I'm calling the helpline for sure.
Yes, everybody
As
call
soon
the
as I get
helpline.
off this chair, I'm calling that line.
I think something that I really appreciate from this movie is that when you're going through something or you have a loving one that is going through something, like your community always comes together to be there for you, and this is something that happens in the movie. Like pawn shop owner comes in, like all these people come in to help the pickpocket, and it's very beautiful. I think that's really nice.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. I just want to give another thank you to each of our panelists. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. This panel flew by so quickly. My goodness. So thank you so much, Denise. Thank you, Farhad. Thank you so much, Mohamed, Mollie, Patrick, and Rocío for sharing your amazing insights into all the projects that you have premiering here at Sundance. That is a huge, huge feat. So congratulations to each of you.
Thank you for coming.
And also, I just want to lastly thank Impact 24 PR, Goodside, the California Post Alliance, and Confidential Creative for putting this incredible panel together. And of course, to all of you, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join this amazing panel.
Thank you.